Welcome to an evening with Damon West. Hands to Hands Community Fund has presented an event similar to this for the past 7 years. We have had speakers from all walks of life who share their stories, which entertain and motivate our audiences. This year, we knew we were going to need to be very creative to be able to bring this event to you, and we feel we have been. Instead of you coming to us, we're coming to you in the comfort of your own home. We are so pleased to have Damon West with us this evening to share his story of success and failure and transformation. This is truly one of the most powerful stories you will hear. Please join me in welcoming a very inspirational young man, Damon West.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Jeannie. Thank you. That was wonderful. Oh my God, thank you for having me here in Wichita Falls too. And I got to tell you, when Nancy first got in touch with me months ago, I think it was a year ago, about doing this event, the world looked different at the time. But then the world changed in 2020. March of 2020, actually, we came to what I call a fork in the road in life. And fork in the roads are when you wake up one day and the world looks different. Things are in different places. But you've got to keep going. You've got choices to make. You know, you can make the right choices and go the right way, the wrong choices and go the wrong direction. And so Nancy saw the evolution of what was going on out there, and she said, we still need to have our event, but we need to find a way to find the opportunity here. And that was perfect for the theme, because when I go around speaking all over the country, I always talk about finding the opportunities in adversity, because that's what a coffee bean does. And so now I think with this program tonight that we have found the opportunity in adversity. So stick with us as we tell you this story. So let's go. Let's start the story off 13 years ago, July 30th, 2008. I'm sitting around this little rundown apartment in Dallas, Texas, and I'm sitting on this couch, and I've got my meth dealer sitting next to me on the couch. It's this guy named Tex, and I'm sitting there smoking meth with Tex. Got everybody's attention now. Everybody's like, wow, you know, because it's incongruent with what you see in front of you. But in 2008, I was a full-blown meth addict, y'all. And so I'm sitting there smoking meth with Tex, and I'm telling Tex, I think the end is near. I think the cops are about to come get me. You see, 10 days before this guy I had been doing all these burglaries with in Dallas, this guy named Dustin, had been picked up by the Dallas Police Department. So they've got my partner in crime in custody. I know it's just a matter of time before they get to me. And just as I passed the pipe back to Tex, I heard a window shatter off to my right. Psh! And tumbling across my living room floor is this little canister going in over in, and it's smoking on one side. Y'all, I've seen this movie before. I know what's about to happen. I tried to get up off that couch and get out of that living room, but boom! The flashbang grenade went off right in my face. Bright white light, loud noise, blew me back on the couch. And when I came to, when I can see and hear again, this cop in full SWAT riot gear. Man, he's got his boot on my chest, and the barrel of a machine gun is digging in my eye socket. And I can feel the barrel against my eyeball. It's cold. And he's got his finger on the trigger, and he is screaming at me, "Don't move! Don't move!" Man, I looked at this cop, and I blinked. I was like, man, don't worry, you know, don't worry. So a cop started flooding my apartment, and I heard one of them scream out, "We got him! We got the uptown burglar." The uptown burglar. Y'all, you're going to hear a story tonight of transformation and change, but you know, honestly, it doesn't matter how many people's lives I positively impact with this story. I'll never escape that name, that moniker, the uptown burglar. That's the consequences of my decisions. About a dozen other meth addicts and myself, young and old, male and female, black and white, and everything in between. Because drugs and addiction do not discriminate. That's it, man. Drugs and addiction doesn't care who you are, where you come from, your mom and dad, or your race, your gender, your socioeconomic status. Addiction, when it's got a hold of you, it's got you. And in 2008, it had me. You know, this meth crew that I put together, this burglary crew I put together, we indiscriminately and without reservation broke into the homes of dozens and dozens of people in the uptown neighborhood of Dallas to feed our insatiable meth habits. But on July 30th, 2008, the uptown burglaries came to an end. They had their man. They zip-tied me in the floor of that apartment. They took me down to Dallas County Jail, where they processed me in fingerprints, mugshots, the works. They threw me in a holding cell, where I spent the first 4 hours of my incarceration with one thought on my mind. That first 24 hours in holding, all I cared about was getting high. How can I get out of here and get high? How can I get some drugs brought into here and get high? And that's the thought I played with for the next 10 months. While I waited for my day in court. And 10 months after my arrest, on May 18th, 2009, I finally got my day in court. Actually, I got my 6 days in court. And 6 days is a long criminal trial for crimes that are non-aggravated. No one was ever home during my burglaries. No one was ever physically hurt. But at the end of 6 days, that jury of my peers listened to so much overwhelming evidence of my guilt of the crime of engaging in organized criminal activity that they went to deliberate for 10 minutes on my sentence. 10 minutes, y'all. I don't know how much Law and Order you watch, but if a jury's gone for 10 minutes, they smoked you. And when I came back in that courtroom, that judge who hadn't smiled the entire trial, he is grinning from ear to ear, and he said, Damon Joseph West, you are hereby sentenced to 65 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. 65 years is a life sentence, y'all. A jury gave me life that day. Now, obviously, I didn't do life in prison because I'm coming to you from Wichita Falls right now, not from a prison cell somewhere. I did 7 years and 3 months in the maximum security penitentiary in Beaumont, Texas. And on November 16th, 2015, the parole board came to see me. And the lady from parole that's interviewing me for my parole visit, she's looking at my file and she closes it up after a couple minutes. She pushes the file away and she said, Mr. West, I'm just going to be honest with you. We don't see a lot of people come through state prison like you. She said, you had more opportunities than anybody ever gets in life, and more privilege than anybody ever gets in life. And you went through all that. You blew through all that. You became a meth addict. You became a criminal. You made a lot of victims. And a jury sentenced you to life in prison for the things you did. She said, but instead of coming to prison and letting that life sentence define you, she said, you changed yourself inside this prison. She said, as a matter of fact, you changed the entire prison around you. She said, so I've got one question for you today, Mr. West. She said, if you could be remembered for being anything in life, anything at all, she said, give it to me in just one word, go. And man, you talk about an easy question for a coffee bean to answer. I fired her answer back at her real quick, and I said, useful, ma'am. I just want to be useful. And I can be useful in this prison, or I can be useful out in the world finding those coffee beans. And they let me go that day. November 16, 2015, I walked on a parole for a life sentence of parole. I'm on parole for the rest of my life till 2073. I check in with a parole officer every month. I pee in a cup. I pay my fines every month. Anytime I leave the state of Texas, I've got to get parole's permission to do it. But honestly, y'all, you know what? I don't care about parole. And that's not a cavalier statement saying, well, I just don't care. No, parole tells me something. I follow all the rules. They tell me to jump. I say how high. I do everything I'm told to do in this new life. But when I say I don't care about parole, it's this. I'm a coffee bean. And the only way a coffee bean is going to go back to prison is if he's going back in there to share his message of hope and strength to the other inmates in there. So let me back this story up. Let me give you a little bit of context for who I am, where I came from. I grew up in a town called Port Arthur, Texas. And Port Arthur is down in southeast Texas, down where Louisiana and Texas meet on the Gulf Coast down there. Came from a great family, y'all. My dad, Bob West, was a sports writer for 50 years in Port Arthur. He was the first sports writer in that entire part of Texas to put black athletes on the front page of a sports page. Revolutionary in 1971 when he did it, man. You would have thought he did something terrible. Man, people lost their mind down there when he put a black guy on the front page. They broke his windows out. They slit his tires. They sent him a bunch of hate mail. And my dad saved that hate mail. And growing up, my older brother, my younger brother and I, when we were old enough to read that hate mail, he made us read it because he wanted us to see what it was like to take a stand and do the right thing. Because sometimes taking a stand and doing the right thing means you're going to stand alone. And that lesson would come so handy for me in life later on. My mom, Jeannie, was a nurse, so I had a nice, knit, little happy family. But we had problems too. Everybody's family's got issues they go through. Give you an example. In 2009, when I was 9 years old, in 1985, I came out and told my parents that my babysitter had been molesting me. And this is childhood sexual abuse back in the 80s, y'all. They didn't know as much about it back then as they know now. They didn't do as much about it back then. It was a female babysitter. My parents, they even went to the police in Port Arthur, and the police told my parents in 1985, it's a female, your son's a male, there's not a lot we can do about that. But my parents did everything they could. They wanted to help me out. They sent me to talk to a family counselor, talk to a family priest, and we prayed about it. We prayed a lot in our home. My mom is one of those moms. My mom, to this day, she has a prayer plaque or a cross in every room in the house. You can't escape God in my mom's house. My mom is one of those moms. And some of y'all may have a mom like that. Some of y'all may be a mom like that, but that was my mother. So I had some issues when I was 9. By the time I was 10, I got into alcohol because I liked the way it felt to drink my dad's beer and get a little bit drunk. And then I started stealing my mom's cigarettes. And then by the time I was 12, I was smoking pot. I was skipping school with my friends, rolling blunts, and I had a lot of bad belief systems. Belief systems, y'all. A bad belief system tells you how to do something the wrong way over and over again. And the longer you hold on to a belief system, well, the harder it is to get rid of it. And my bad belief system at 10 and 12 years old said, all you're doing is drinking a little beer, smoking a little pot. You're not hurting anybody. You're not even hurting yourself. But I couldn't have been more wrong. And I'm going to tell you something else I learned about belief systems, is that bad belief systems, they're very hard to change. And in the end, bad belief systems, they usually win out. Mine certainly was. Growing up when I was, I was 13, 14 years old, had a lot of character issues, but I got away with a lot because I could throw a football, y'all. And this is Texas. Texas high school football, y'all know this is like a religion. And down there in Port Arthur, man, I was a 3-year starting quarterback for my 5A team. I got a scholarship to play ball at the University of North Texas. And when I left college, when I left home and went to college, when I pulled out of Port Arthur in my car in 1994, man, the wheels came off, y'all. Because all I cared about when I got to college was either partying in my fraternity or being the starting quarterback for my Division I college football team. And I did both really well. But like I told you at the very beginning, life has a way of giving you these days that I call those fork in the road days. I came to a very big fork in the road in 1996, September 21st, 1996, where we take the field against Texas A&M. Beautiful Saturday afternoon in College Station, Texas.
Damon West is the starting quarterback. Cromer's his running back. They go with a single set back, 2 flankers, 2 tight ends. They go on a play action back to the 20, now to the 25. Now he'll run with it West across the 35 to about the 37.
I'm 20 years old. I'm the starting quarterback for my Division I team, and on the 3rd play of that game, I go down with a separated shoulder. And I never played college football again. And when I got up to that fork in the road in life, guess what kicked in? My belief system. Because when you handle adversity, when you come up to a tough situation in life, your belief system is what's going to kick in. If you've got a good one, that's great. If you've got a bad one, buckle up because you're in trouble. And I had bad belief systems, y'all. And now instead of just drinking a little beer, smoke a little pot, now I'm doing the hardcore drugs. I don't like being Damon West. I put all my value, my identity, my self-worth into being a college football player. I started putting in the hardcore drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, pills, you name it. If it was a drug in the 90s, I was doing it. Somehow I graduated college in 1999. I move off to Washington, D.C. I get a job working in the United States Congress, that beautiful Capitol dome I worked in every day. And after that job, I went to work for a guy running for president of the United States, raising money for him all over the country. And in 2004, when he dropped out of the race for president, I moved back to Dallas, Texas to train to be a stockbroker for one of the biggest Wall Street banks in the world, UBS, United Bank of Switzerland. And it was at that job as a broker that I came up to another very, very big fork in the road in life. I was passed out of my desk asleep at work one day, and this other broker comes up. He sees me sleeping. He wakes me up. He freaks out. He's like, Damon, man. He said, wake up. He said, man, you can't sleep on this job. He said, the markets are open. You're messing with people's money. He said, they'll fire you for that. He said, come on down to the parking garage. I got someone's going to pick you up. So I got up out of my seat. I go with him to the parking garage. I think we're going to do a little cocaine because that's what I was doing in 2004. And when we got into his car, he handed me this glass pipe with these crystal rocks in it. And man, when I saw that glass pipe, I freaked out. I've never seen a glass pipe before. And I'm like, man, what is that? He said, Damon. He said, just relax, man. He said, it's crystal meth. He said, you'll love this stuff. Y'all, truer words have never been spoken. I fell in love with methamphetamines that day. And listen, if you don't remember anything from my story, remember this next 30 seconds. Meth is the most evil, most destructive, most addictive drug ever created by man. That stuff is made in a lab, and it will grab you just like that. It grabbed me. I could not give everything away fast enough for that drug, and that's the life of an addict. I'm an addict. No one takes anything from an addict. Addicts, we give it away, y'all. I gave up my job, my home, my car, my family, my sanity, my tethering to God. I went from working on Wall Street to living on the streets of Dallas. I'm homeless. I don't have a place to live in. I sleep in abandoned buildings. I live out of people's cars. I live in dope houses with other dope fiends, because that's what I am, as a dope fiend. And I start committing property crimes to fund my addiction. First, it starts off with simple property crimes, breaking into people's cars, breaking into people's storage units, and eventually it escalated to home burglaries. And y'all, when I committed these burglaries, I didn't just steal people's property. I stole people's sense of security. I make it a point to always talk about victims everywhere I go, because they have to live with that for the rest of their lives, and so do I. But after 3 years of committing property crimes against the people of Dallas, on July 30th, 2008, the Dallas SWAT team put an end to the Uptown burglaries for good, and that's when they had their man. They arrested me that day. Or as I tell audience everywhere I go, that wasn't just the day I was arrested. Man, that was the day I was rescued, y'all. God got me out of a situation I could not get myself out of. So now we're back where the story started. They've arrested me. I'm in that holding cell that first 24 hours. And then the guards come to get me. And man, these folks in Dallas are mad at me. I've been terrorizing Dallas for 3 years, and they've got me in chains now. And they take me to general population, put me in one of the worst pods they could find. And within 24 hours of that, I'm in my first fight in county jail over a breakfast tray, y'all. And I am scared to death. I mean, look, I'm not a big guy. So they have these phones in the day room. And all I want to do is that first part of being in jail, I want to talk to my mom and I want to talk to my dad. I'm like reverting back to being like a child. So I get on those day room phones and I call home. And my dad answers the phone. And I remember, my dad is in his 70s. He's from an older generation of men. They don't show a lot of emotion. I've never seen my father cry, but I heard him cry one time. And that was when I called home from jail. And he was screaming and crying in the phone like a wounded animal. Like, Damon, how we go so wrong? How we mess up so bad? And what could we have done different? And now he's crying and I'm crying because I broke my old man. So my mom snatches the phone out of my dad's hands. My mom's a nurse. She's used to compartmentalizing pain. And so she says, Damon, listen. She said, I've never seen your father like this before in my life. She said, he cannot talk right now, but we have to have a conversation and we've got to talk. She said, you need to understand that we love you unconditionally. She said, there's nothing you could do, nothing at all, to make us not love you. She said, Damon, that was the deal we made with God when he loaned you to us. She said, do you understand that we love you unconditionally? And through the tears, I told my mom, I was like, yeah, Mom, I get it. You love me unconditionally. And she said, that's good, baby, because we just gave you back to God. She said, I'll never forget what she said. She said, you are now a captive audience to God, and you better start listening. And then she asked me a question. She said, Damon, do you remember that prayer plaque that we had on your wall as a kid growing up? Remember I told you my mom has these prayer plaques and crosses all over the house, but she's asking me about the one above my bedroom where I grew up in Port Arthur, Texas. And I mean, my brain's fried. I've been on this meth for 4 years, y'all. My brain doesn't even fire right. And so I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? What prayer plaque? And she said, baby, footprints in the sand. It was footprints in the sand. Do you remember the story of footprints in the sand? And I was like, no, Mom, I don't. So she patiently and lovingly retold me the story of footprints in the sand about a guy walking on the beach with God. She said they're walking on the beach and they're watching a video of his life play out in the sky. And she said every time something good happened in that man's life, there were two sets of footprints walking side by side. Things were going well. She said, but every time something bad happened, when there was pain, there was hurt, there was suffering, there was loss, and to lose his football career, the guy saw one set of footprints. And finally, she said the guy couldn't stand anymore, so he calls God out. He says, God, what's up, man? Every time something good in my life happens, man, I see you're walking with me side by side. But when the bad stuff starts happening, you abandon me, man. All I can see is one set of footprints. Why do you abandon me? And she said that's when God laughed and said, Damon, you fool. Man, every time you saw one set of footprints, I didn't abandon you. I carried you. Boy, she started screaming like a football coach. She's screaming and she said, Damon, look down at that jail cell right now, Damon. She said, there is only one set of footprints and they're not yours. She said, get on God's back. I don't want to lose my son. So, y'all, I listened to my mom that night. And I started praying to a God that I hadn't talked to in 12 years since I got hurt playing college football. And in this conversation with God, this presentation is not something about some Paul on the road to Damascus. This isn't some kind of jailhouse conversion story. That's a long way away. I'm an addict, y'all. Let me tell you my prayer to God. I'd get on my knees every night in Dallas County Jail. And I'd get on my knees and I'd say the same prayer. Dear God, please, get me out of this one. And if you do, bargain with God, huh? If you do, boy, I'll be a normal guy again. I'll go get a job and I'll just smoke meth on the weekends. Yeah, I got this, God. Yeah, right. That prayer never got answered. It never got heard. And I know that because 10 months later, when I went to trial, and that jury came back in 10 minutes with a life sentence, it took my breath away. It took my mom's breath. My mom was in the front row of the courtroom. And when the judge said 65 years, my mother gasped. You know the sound only a mother can make when she hears her son get a life sentence in prison. And everything sped up after that. The sheriffs were on me, the bailiffs were on me, they throw my arms behind my back, they handcuffed me, they're dragging me out of the courtroom, and all I can think to say is they're dragging me out of the courtroom, so I'm sorry, Mom. And they put me in this little side room, and in that side room there's a bulletproof glass. They put me on the other side of it. The bailiff told me to wait. About 5 minutes later, my parents come in on the other side of the bulletproof glass, and they're gonna give my parents one last visit with me before I go to prison. My dad comes in first, man. He's stoic. He's in stunned disbelief. He just saw his son, with all this promise in life, get a life sentence in prison. So my mom, that strong-willed woman, the nurse, she does all the talking. And she said, baby, she said, debts in life demand to be paid, and you just got hit with one heck of a bill from the state of Texas. She said, but you did the things they said you did at that trial, Damon. So you have to go and pay that debt to society. She said, but you owe your father and I debt too. She said, Damon, we gave you all the opportunity, love, and support to be anything you wanted to be in life. And that's how you repay us, what we saw in that courtroom? She said, it's not going to work, Damon. She said, we raised you in Port Arthur, Texas, a giant melting pot of a city, gave you a great moral compass, which you chose to not use. So here's the debt you're going to pay to us. When you go to prison, you will not get in one of these white hate groups, one of these Aryan Brotherhood type gangs, because you're scared because you're the minority in there. She said, it's not going to work, Damon. You were never raised to see race, and you're not going to start now. She said, you will not get any tattoos while you're in that prison. Y'all, man, I show people my sleeves everywhere I go. I was in prison for almost 10 years. These guys want to tattoo every inch of your body in the joint. And every time one of these guys in prison would come up to me and say, hey, Wes, let me put a tattoo on you. I'd be like, hey, man, I can't do it. My mom said no. Because my mom told me that day, May 18th, 2009, she told me, she said, Damon, no gangs, no tattoos. She said, you come back as the man we raised, or do not come back at all. She said, do you understand this debt you're going to pay? I said, yeah, Mom, I got it. I do. I'm crying like a baby at this point. This is tough love for my mom. And she said, good. And the guards took me away. They took me back to my pod in Dallas County Jail. So what do I really know about what I just promised my parents, man? I'm a white middle-class guy in America. What do I know about the penitentiary system, right? So I get back to my pod in Dallas County Jail, and I'm asking all these guys that had been to prison before, how am I going to survive? What am I going to do? And every single guy I talk to, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, they're telling me the same thing. You got to get into a gang, Wes. You can't survive without a gang. They tell me that lie they tell people in the streets all the time. The gang is your family. The gang will love you. The gang will protect you. All lies. What was not a lie is what they told me about where I was going. Because they told me you're going to the worst part of the Texas prison system where everybody on the building you live on has life. They call it the life sentence building. You got a life sentence. Man, make your life easy, Wes. Get into a gang. But there was this one guy that was different from everybody else in there. This older black guy named Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, he's probably in his 60s. I never got Jackson's age. He's a career criminal. Been out of prison all of his life, 4 or 5 times. But he was the most positive guy I've ever met in my life, man. This guy had a smile on his face every day you saw Mr. Jackson. So one morning, Mr. Jackson comes up to me. He's got a cup of coffee in his hand, has a smile on his face. He said, West, man, I've been watching how you're dealing with these knuckleheads and these dummies. Talk about you got to get into a gang. He said, do not listen to these fools. He said, you want to keep that promise you made to your mom and your dad and to God, to yourself? He said, let me tell you how you're going to do this. He said, let me lace you up. Let me tell you what prison's going to be like. He said, the first thing you need to understand about prison is all about race. He said, race runs the entire disgusting institution. He said, when you get into prison, for example, he said, you're going to see a TV set in the day room. And in front of that TV set, well, there's rows of benches. He said, that first row of benches, that's for the blacks. That's our row. He said, do not sit on that row. You'll get your head smashed in. He said, that second row of benches, that's for the Hispanics. He said, don't sit on their row either. They'll smash your head in too. He said, that third row, if there's a third row, well, that's where the white folks sit. He said, if there's no third row, white folks sit on the floor. He said, that's just the way the numbers work in prison. So don't get into a wreck over race. And he said, because it's about race, when you walk in the door there, the white gangs, they get the first dibs on you. The Aryan Brotherhood, the Aryan Circle, the White Knights, the Woods. He said, you're fighting them all. And my head is spinning, y'all, when he's telling me this. He said, you're fighting them all. He said, if you don't give in to their ideology of hate out of fear, ladies and gentlemen, human beings will do a lot of things in life out of fear. We'll do things out of fear that are antithetical to our own good. Because fear is a liar. Fear will tell you something that's not true and make you believe it. Fear will have you going down an alternate reality. My co-author on the Coffee Bean, John Gordon says fear and faith have more in common than just the letter F to begin with. He said fear and faith both believe in a future that hadn't happened yet. He said fear is a negative future we choose to believe in, or faith is the other positive future we choose to believe in. And John's saying all the time, always choose faith over fear. And that's kind of what Jackson's telling me today. He said, don't get into the white gangs out of fear. He said, but get ready, because after you get done fighting the white gangs, then the black gangs are coming after you. And they're going to send, the white gangs are going to send the black gangs after you. The Crips, the Bloods, the Gangster Disciples, Mandingo Warriors. He said, you're fighting them all. And he said, if you survive all that, and you can survive all that, you will earn the right to walk alone. He said, the strongest man in prison always walks alone, does not join a gang. And he told me something about fighting that day that has become like a mantra in my life ever since. When he told me, he said, you don't have to win all your fights, but you do have to fight all your fights. And that's a huge lesson in life, y'all. Because you're not made to win all your fights. You're going to lose sometimes in life, and you know what? That's okay. That's part of life. But like Jackson was telling me that day, you have to get up and get back in the fight. You got to get up and keep going every single day. Get up. And when he's telling me this back in 2009, he's looking at me now. It's like there's fear coming out of me. There's like, I'm like a deer in the headlights. And that's what he said. Hang on, Wes. He said, let me break it down to you another way. He said, I want you to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. And he said, anything we put in this pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. He said, I'm going to put 3 things in that pot of boiling water and watch how they change. A carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. So he said, first things first. He said, if I put a carrot in that pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, what happens to the carrot? I said, well, the carrot turns soft, Mr. Jackson. He said, that's right. He said, the carrot went into the water hard, but the water, the prison, turned that hard carrot soft and mushy. He said, the carrot got beat, he got robbed, he got raped, and he may have gotten killed. He said, you don't want to be the carrot. He said, what about the egg, Wes? What happens to the egg in that pot of boiling water we call prison? And I said, well, the egg turns hard, Mr. Jackson, like a hard-boiled egg. And he said, that's right. He said, the egg is a shell that protects it physically, but inside that shell, that soft, liquid core, his heart becomes hardened. He said, if your heart becomes hardened, you're incapable of giving or receiving love. And he said, if you're incapable of giving and receiving love, you have become institutionalized, and you will not come back as someone your parents recognize, because your eggshell will have swastikas tattooed all over it. And that's when he asked me, what about the coffee bean? And I had no clue, y'all. I didn't know what happened to a coffee bean in a pot of boiling water. And that's when Mr. Jackson shared with me one of the most important lessons I've ever learned in life. He said, if I put a coffee bean into that same pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you got to change the name of the water to coffee. Because he said the coffee bean, Wes, the smallest of these 3 things, he said, small like you, had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot, because the power is inside the coffee bean, just like the power is inside of you. And he said, everybody in life puts out this energy, this negative or positive energy. He said, whatever kind of energy you put out, you attract back. It's called the law of attraction, and it works. He said, so if you want to walk around prison all the time with a mean mug on your face and a frown all the time, you want to look hard, he said, man, what you're going to do is attract the hardest people in your life. And when you're going to the life sentence building, that can be a dangerous, even deadly endeavor to attract these people to you. He said, but Wes, if you walk around that prison with a smile on your face and you let those guys know they're not getting to you, no matter what they do, they can't break you. He said, you will change prison from the inside out. And he said, the best part about it is the other coffee beans in prison, the other positive inmates, they'll find you because of your energy. And Mr. Jackson told me, he gave me a hint of where some coffee beans might be. He said, if you want to find where a lot of those coffee beans are hanging out, he said, get down to the chapel. Coffee beans love to be in the chapel. And the last thing Mr. Jackson told me when I was getting ready to get on that prison bus in August of 2009, getting ready to get shackled up to another human being on going that bus ride back, going to prison, Mr. Jackson looked at me and he said, Wes, go out there and go be a coffee bean. Be a coffee bean, man. 4 words. If this old man is shooting me straight, that meant that the power is inside me. And if the power is inside me, then it can't be in the hands of the criminal justice system, the guards, the other inmates, not unless I give it to them. And if the power is inside me, if the power is truly inside me, it doesn't matter what environment I'm dropped off in. Even a maximum security level 5 penitentiary in Texas, I won't only survive that environment, I'll thrive. And I got my chance to find out, y'all. Prison was the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life. The most dangerous thing, the scariest thing I've ever done in life. My book, The Change Agent, my life story, covers the first 2 months of prison. It was crazy, y'all. I mean, right when I walked through the door that first day of prison, I get in a fight with one of the biggest Nazis in the tank, right? And it's the white gangs first, and sometimes more than one at a time. It takes me 2 weeks to get through fighting the white gangs. Then it's the black gangs. And now they're coming after me. They're trying to break me, y'all. And I'm 6 weeks into prison. I'm still fighting the black gangs. Y'all, it was a Saturday. I went down to the chapel one Saturday. About 6 weeks into it, I'm a broken man at this point. I go down to the chapel, and I want to go to Catholic Mass one more time. I want to go to a church service one more time before I killed myself. And I told this little volunteer chaplain lady there, this little lady named Miss D. Miss D. Doucette, I'll never forget. Well, Miss D's about 5 feet tall. She has a cane. She's in her 80s. And I mean, she'll hit you with a cane like Yoda, too. She's like, I mean, she's really forceful. But Miss D was in there that day. She saw something was wrong with me. She brought me in her office. And I told Miss D, I said, Miss D, I can't do it anymore. I can't do 65 years of this. I can't do it. I'm going to kill myself. And she told me, she said, you can't do that, Damon. You can't give up. You can't lose hope. And she tells me, you can't give up on God. And I'm like, God? What do you mean, God? How can you talk about God? How could God create a place like prison? And she said, oh, Damon, she said, you're not the first person to question God. She said, the Bible's full of people that question God, but they always came back to God because they knew what the secret to faith was. And I'm like, Miss D, I'm drowning over here. Tell me what the secret to faith is. She said, it's this. She said, if you're going to pray, don't worry. But if you're going to worry, don't pray. She said, you can't have it both ways, Damon. Choose wisely who's going to drive that car. But she told me, she said, the last time you drove the car, you parked it inside of a maximum security prison. So choose wisely. So I went back to my pod that day and thought of what Ms. D said, and she was right, you know. She was right. All hope is not gone. I think with suicide, I think a lot of people get into the suicide because they get into this frame of mind that I call seemingly hopeless. And it's seemingly hopeless because it seems that way, but it's not really ever hopeless. There's always hope if you can get out of that tunnel vision of fear and despair. And so Ms. D pulled me out of that day. 2 days later, Monday morning, I get up and I go to the rec yard. And I'm going to go and earn some respect playing some sports that day. I decided I'm going to do something different. And I'm fighting the black gangs at this point. I go to the rec yard, which is the most racially charged place in prison. I mean, it's the life sentence building rec yard. I mean, there's certain sports that you can't even integrate the races. Like sand volleyball is for whites and Hispanics only. The handball court is for, every race can play handball, but if you want to partner and play doubles, you got to get someone with the same race to play with you. Even the weight stack, you want someone to spot you, they've got to be the same race as you are. So I went to the basketball court that Monday morning, y'all, where no white guys are allowed to play, but I'm from Port Arthur. I've been the only white guy in the basketball court before. I've been around blacks all my life, y'all. They can't scare me with this. So I go out there in the basketball court that day, and I get myself in a game of basketball. That takes me 6 days of playing basketball with these guys. And this is the most brutal basketball you've ever seen in your life. This is football and hockey and basketball combined. And I mean, I'm getting knocked around out there every single day, and I'm giving it back where I can. But after 6 days of playing basketball with these guys out there, they circled up around me in the basketball court after the 6th day, and they said, hey, look, man, you pulled something off out here we'd never seen a white boy pull off before. They said, you took everything we had, and you gave it back when you could, but you never once, as much as we pushed you, you never got racial with us. They said, man, you don't have to worry about the blacks the rest of the time you're in prison. You're good with us. And y'all, that felt good. It felt good, but I'm going to tell you, the first thing that went through my head was Mr. Jackson. Because the big takeaway from this story about going to the basketball court isn't about the scared white boy that went out there and got his respect. We get that. That's on the surface. I always try to look below the surface, see what's really going on. The big story was those men on that basketball court. Some of those guys had 20 years of a bad belief system. Says a guy with my skin color doesn't belong in their basketball game. But in 6 days, man, those guys made a change. They brought me into their world. They accepted me. 6 days, they all became coffee beans. We all did on that regular. We were making coffee. And so I saw with my own 2 eyes that you could become a coffee bean, that stuff worked, that Jackson knew what he was talking about. And it was just in time, too, y'all, because, prison is breaking me down at this point, y'all, and I'm becoming the egg, and I don't want to be the egg. And I remember the conversation I had with Jackson when he told me about the carrot, the egg, and the coffee bean when I asked Mr. Jackson, what do you find more of in prison? And Jackson fired back real quick, and he said, eggs. He said, the egg is a natural evolution of a human being in the environment you're about to go into, and you will probably become an egg too. And I was becoming that egg, and I didn't want to be that egg. I was in my cell one night, in 45 cell, and my cellmate, this little Hispanic guy named Carl, and I'll never forget Carl. Carl's about 5'4", little bank robber from San Antonio. He's a real dangerous little dude. Don't go to size fool you, but Carlos was a good guy. He's my buddy. He's my first cellmate. He showed me the ropes in prison. So it was one night, we were in our cell, and I was in my bottom bunk. He was in his top bunk. It's a little 10 by 12 we live in. And I'm telling Carlos the story of the coffee bean. And Carlos jumped down on the top bunk. He was a real animated little guy. He's like, oh my God. He said, I love the coffee bean story. He said, but West, you're no coffee bean, and you're never going to be a coffee bean. I'm like, Carlos, man, how can you tell me I can't be a coffee bean? What are you, the coffee bean king? How can you tell me that? He said, because the way you think, Wes. He said, all action is born of thought, and thoughts without action. He pointed to the day room downstairs. He said the day room was full of people with thoughts without action. That's what thoughts without action looks like. He said, the way you think controls your action. He said, he gave me a riddle. He said, 3 frogs are sitting on a log. One of the frogs makes the decision to jump. He said, how many frogs are left on the log? I've been to college. I'm 2. Carlos, two frogs. He said, wrong. All 3 frogs are still sitting in the log. He said the frog that made the decision to jump never took any action to jump. He said, you're that 3rd frog right now. You got this decision. You want to become this coffee bean. You got this vision in your head. You're going to be coffee bean. He said, but you can't do it because of the way you think. And so humbly, I finally asked Carlos, then how do I do it? He said, you have to change the way you think, West. You got to change your mindset inside this place. He said, you have to quit looking at prison as a punishment and start looking at prison as an opportunity. There's that word again. I started out this presentation by talking about how Nancy and I talked about putting this whole thing together tonight, about finding the opportunity in adversity. Now think about this. Opportunity in adversity. There's no more adverse situation I've ever been in my life or I could ever get myself in than with a life sentence on a maximum security prison here in Texas. And this guy in my cell is telling me that this isn't a punishment. This is your big opportunity in life. Man, I looked at Carlos a second hand and said, what are you talking about, man? Opportunity? He says, West. He said, you'll never get another opportunity again like this to work on yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and become the best version of yourself possible. He said, what are you prepared to do with your opportunity? So I got up the next morning. My feet hit the cold concrete floor of the prison cell, and I said it out loud. I don't even know if I believed it. I said, hey, God, thanks for this opportunity. And I got to work on myself that day. And you know what? I got up the next day. And I did the same thing. And I didn't believe it at first, y'all, but I got up and put 1 foot forward, 1 foot in front of the other, every single day, creating good belief systems, replacing bad with good belief systems. Remember I told you bad belief systems are hard to change. I'm in prison now, and I'm working on changing the belief system. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and months became years. But I finally figured out how to become that coffee bean. And I figured it out. I broke it down to 5 ways to become a coffee bean. These are 5 things I have to do every single day to become a coffee bean. I'm going to share them with you right now. So the first rule about being a coffee bean is you have to have positive body language everywhere you go. That means you smile. You know? Your smile is so powerful. First thing that happens whenever you smile is you flood your brain with these things called endorphins, these little chemicals that flood your brain. They make you feel good. Now you've got something to give, and you can't give what you don't have. So now you're positive. You're walking around, you're smiling, and guess what? People that see you smile, they smile back because smiles are like that. People read each other's body language for cues. Now, conversely, you walk around, you're negative all the time. No one wants to go around you, but you're smiling, you attract people to you. People are positive. And negative people have 2 choices in a room full of smiling, positive people, even a jail cell, a prison cell full of smiling, positive people. They either get with the program and become positive, which, by the way, is what most negative people do. You know why? Because human beings have this inherent need to want to belong and be loved. We want to be part of the herd, part of the pack. We don't want to get left behind. I'm going to tell you how strong that need to belong and be loved is. When I go into prisons today, to this day, and I go talk to inmates all over the country, men's prisons, women's prisons, there's always going to be one inmate that comes up to me after the presentation's over, and they're like, you know, Damon, you got the most amazing life ever for a guy that's been incarcerated before, but of all the things you've done in your life, I want to know how you did that. How'd you find someone that would love you again? And you know, it brought me back to when I was in prison, because even in prison, you lay around in your bunk and you wonder, man, will someone ever take me in with all the stuff I've done? And that is what inmates want to know about in prison. They want to know, how do I find someone to love me again? That's how strong the need is to want to belong and be loved. So most negative people in a room full of smiling, positive people, they'll get with you. They want to be part of that positive energy too. But the truly negative people, the ones I call the hardcore, hard-boiled eggs, in a room full of smiling, positive people, you know what they do? They quit. They quit their job. They quit their team. They quit the school. They quit hanging around the water cooler because no one's there to gossip with them anymore. You drive the most negative people away with positive energy. And you know what? That's okay too. Because we're not going to let one negative person ruin our positive environment, our positive locker rooms. So the first rule about being a coffee bean is positive body language. Your second rule about being a coffee bean is working out on yourself every day in 3 areas. 3 areas. Spiritually, mentally, and physically. Y'all was locked up with guys in the prison. They could play in the NBA, the NFL. These guys were just stout, physical specimens. But they didn't work out on anything else besides their bodies. They didn't work out on their minds. They didn't work on their soul. You want to be a coffee bean? You got to work out all 3. And people ask me all the time, Damon, what's a spiritual workout? How do I do that? I'll give you mine. I'll give you my spiritual workout. When I got into recovery in prison, I learned how to pray. I'm in a 12-step recovery program. And this is my prayer I say to God every day, and it's the only thing I pray for every day. I get on my knees in the morning when I start my day and I say, hey, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize it when I see it. That's it. I don't want to miss that. And then I go about my day. I go looking for ways to serve. And now that I'm in the right mindset, I'm humble, I'm in the right mindset looking to serve, I've got my mental workout. Now, your mental workout's important. That's everything, every book you read, every video you watch, every website you go to, your social media feeds. What are you posting? What are you watching that people post? The news you watch. Let me tell you something. In America, you're watching something that calls itself news and people are screaming at each other. That's not news. That's negative entertainment. Turn that stuff off. We've got a negative epidemic going on in this country right now, and that feeds that kind of stuff. Negative entertainment. Do not put yourself to that. That's a choice. You are what you eat. That's not just about food. It's about everything you put in this big brain of yours up here. You're going to look like on the outside what you put in up here. So feed yourself the right stuff. And physical workout, man, this is one of the biggest gifts of the pandemic. You had a lot more time on your hands to take care of yourself. You try to eat the right foods, get enough rest, get a little exercise in every day. Take care of these bodies. You get one body in this life. At the end of the pandemic, I told people during the pandemic, you're going to see a lot of what I call Post and Kellogg stories. In the 1920s, there were two cereal companies in America, Post and Kellogg's. Really, it was just Post. Post had all the market share in America for the cereals. They were a juggernaut. They were huge. Kellogg's was real small. They could never compete with Post. But in October of 1929, the stock market crashed and the Great Depression began. And when that event happened, Post quit doing the things that made them great out of fear and doubt. They quit marketing. They quit running radio ads. They fired people. They laid people off. They hoarded the little bit of money they had. But Kellogg's, same event in time in history, they saw what was going on with Post. You know what they saw? Opportunity. There's that word again from the very beginning. You can't say opportunity enough. They saw an opportunity. Where Post saw fear, they saw opportunity. And you know what they did? They put the little bit of money they had into marketing, radio. They invented a new cereal during this time called Rice Krispies. And by 1933, 4 years into the Great Depression, Kellogg's overtook Post as the biggest cereal company in America, and they've never looked back since. At the end of this pandemic, with sports and life and everything you can imagine in American culture, you're going to see Post and Kellogg stories. Those that took this time and said, hey, look, I'm going to take this adversity and make some opportunity out of it, and the other ones that just laid down and died. You always want to be the Kellogg in that story. The third rule about being a coffee bean is what the secret to life is. The secret to life is servant leadership. And servant leadership is helping other people achieve their goals in life, helping other people reach their goals in life, helping to raise other people up to a different station in life. What we're doing tonight, we're trying to raise other people up. That's what it's all about, y'all. And the most fundamental necessity to being a servant leader is humility. Humility is the most basic need to being a servant leader. And we all have this amazing ability to connect with human life. Every one of us, even if you're an introvert out there, you have this amazing ability to connect with people. There's a good story about this from a guy named Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, the children's television show guy, and I'll be honest with you, I watched Mr. Rogers, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I love Mr. Rogers. But before Mr. Rogers was Mr. Rogers, the children's television show guy, he was a Presbyterian minister, and he told this story from the early 60s. He said he went to a church service one Sunday, and they had a substitute preacher come in. And he said that substitute preacher gave a sermon that morning, and when that guy's sermon was over, Mr. Rogers thought to himself, that was the worst sermon I've ever heard. He said this guy was awful. He was terrible. When he gets all the rules of giving a good sermon, he said he almost put him to sleep. And just as Mr. Rogers was about to turn to the lady next to him, the little old lady next to him, and tell that woman how terrible this guy was, he stopped. He bit his tongue because the little old lady next to him was in tears. She was in tears, and she turned to Mr. Rogers, and she said, that was the most beautiful sermon I've ever heard. She said, it was the absolute right thing. I need to hear it at the absolute right time in my life. And she said, I'll never forget where I was this day that I heard this sermon. That floored Mr. Rogers. He was stunned. He realized that every one of us is endowed with this ability to connect with human life, that even that preacher that he thought was so awful profoundly impacted this woman in such a way that he's never thought possible. But he learned another very important lesson in life. He learned that while he was coming in judgment that day, that little old lady was coming in need. In need. Y'all, with the pandemic and everything that's gone on in this country, so many of our American brothers and sisters are coming in need right now. That's what we're here tonight talking about, coming in need. How do we reach out and touch those in need? That's what being a servant leader is all about, finding the need of others and meeting that need. The fourth rule about being a coffee bean is knowing what you do and do not control in life. Y'all, this was a tough one for me. I had to go to prison to understand this rule. In fact, I was in an AA meeting one Wednesday morning in the prison chapel. And the guy that brings the meeting in the chapel, he told me that Wednesday morning that I came in, he said, Damon, great that you came today. Today we're going to diagram the serenity prayer. And he drew a line from one side of the chalkboard to the other. And he said, that line, Damon, represents God's line. And he said that God's line is infinitely long. It's one horizon universe to the next. And he said the first part of the serenity prayer. He said, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. He said the things you cannot change are on God's line. And God's line, man, it's so big. He said, and every time you try to touch something in your life, you try to touch it on God's line. Every time you touch something on God's line, you hurt yourself and you hurt other people. He said, so stay off of God's line. He doesn't need you. And he went and erased a little inch of that line. And he held his fingers up an inch apart. And he said, if God's line is infinitely long, your line is to scale. And he said the second part of that prayer, he said the courage to change the things I can. He said your line is to scale. You get 1 inch of that infinitely long line. And on that line are the things you can change. He said there's 4 things that God allows you to work on every day. 4 things you can change. 4 things you control. He said they are what you think, what you say, what you feel, and most importantly, everybody's going to see what you do, your actions. What you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do. And if it's not one of those 4 things, Damon West, you don't control it. He said because the last part of the prayer was the most important. He said it's the wisdom to know the difference between the big line and the little line. And I get so hung up on this point every day. Y'all listen, I have to tell myself 20 times a day, not on my line, Damon. That's not on my line. And that's one of the things I get hung up with still to this day. Y'all. It's so hard to understand that your entire world of control stops at your ears. Everything you control is inside your head. And if it's not inside your head, you really don't control it. And you've got to allow that to happen around you. But stay focused on the things inside your head. Because if you release control of those things somewhere else, well, that's when you start getting in trouble. Now, the 5th rule about being a coffee bean was one of the most important ones because I had to tap into this all the time to remind myself the 5th rule is that your past does not define you. I would tell myself in the mirror in prison all the time, your past doesn't define you. Y'all, your past doesn't matter. Your past wins don't matter. Your past losses don't matter. Your past is your lesson. You learn from it, and better yet, you can teach other people with it. Your past is powerful. Your past is your lesson. The present, today, that's a gift. You got to make the most of that. And not a gift for you either, by the way, a gift for what you can do for other people. That's the gift of life that you have today. Your past is your lesson, the present is a gift, and the future is your motivation. But here is the warning in my presentation. Motivate yourself with the right things. Because if you do not, if you value your life, you put your identity, your value, your self-worth in things like your home, your car, your job, your bank account, what kind of clothes you wear. Some of these things are important. You can change all those things, though. But you can't change your soul, If you put your value, your identity, your self-worth in the things that are not truly yours, then you run the risk of becoming a prisoner in your mind. And I'm going to tell you something. And you can take this from the fact that I've spent almost 10 years living in a maximum security prison, or the fact that once I got out of prison, I went back to school and got my master's in criminal justice. And today I'm a criminal justice professor at the University of Houston. Yeah, real story. I teach a class. I teach one class. It's called Prisons in America. Prisons in America, y'all. What world? 5 years ago, I was serving life in a prison in America. I'm on parole the rest of my life. But today, I teach about prisons in America. And I can tell you this with authority. The hardest prison in this country, the toughest place to do time in the United States of America is the prison in your mind. Y'all, I meet more people out here in the free world that are locked up than I ever did when I was in prison. Because more people are in prison by their thoughts and by their things than by steel bars and barbed wire and concrete. You can take that to the bank. And the way that I avoid becoming a prisoner in my mind, my value, my identity, my self-worth is in 3 things. My faith, the relationships I've built along the way, and my ability to serve other people. That's it. There's no pandemic. There's no economic downturn. There's no prison sentence that can take away one of those 3 things. And I know that because I walked out of a maximum security prison with only those 3 things. Put your value, your self-life, your worth in the things that truly matter. Find ways to serve, and that's what it means to be a coffee bean. So I'm going to wrap this up what I call my call to action and tell you, listen, first of all, thanks for spending the night with me tonight. This was great. It was wonderful to get to share this message up here in this part of Texas where I haven't ever got to come before. I've never got to speak out here. So it's wonderful to be able to bring the Coffee Bean message to you in your homes tonight. You're going to face hard days, y'all. There's no doubt about that. Life is a pot of boiling water. And when it is, we know what to call our days. There's going to be those days that make you soft and sad and weak, like the carrot. And it's okay. You're going to have carrot days. I had one last week. I was a carrot last week. And then there's going to be those days that make you hard and mad and mean, and life makes you angry and agitated. And you know what? It's okay. You're going to have those days too. And guess what? I had one of those last week. Actually, my wife told me I was a carrot and the egg in the same day. I had a bad day, only for a little bit. I'm going to share one last lesson with you from prison. Is this great lesson? Is that no matter what time of the day it is, 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock at night, you have this amazing power inside of you. You can start your day over anytime you want. Having a bad day, that's a choice. You choose to have a bad day. Because any time of the day, you can stop your day, take a deep breath, step back and say, you know what? I don't have to live like that. I don't have to be the carrot, and I don't have to be the egg. And then go run and jump in that pot of boiling water called life, and you tell life, you know what? Turn it up. I got this. I'm a coffee bean. And the longer the coffee bean sits in the pot of boiling water, the stronger that pot of coffee is going to be. So my call to action to each and every one of y'all out there tonight is the same call to action Mr. Jackson gave to me 12 years ago when I was getting on that prison bus. And it's this: you go out there and you go be a coffee bean. Be a coffee bean, y'all. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation. I know you have many unanswered questions, as there are so many parts of this story Damon only touched on. Please read his book, The Change Agent, so you get the whole story of his incredible journey. As a result of his first book, there have been 2 other best-selling books co-written with John Gordon, The Coffee Bean and The Coffee Bean for Kids. The kids' book is brand new and just released before Christmas. It is a must-read for kids and a great teaching tool in the classroom. We are also so excited to tell you if someone you know missed tonight's presentation, it can be viewed on texomashomepage.com or on the Hands to Hands website. We would like to extend a special thank you to KFDX Wayne Reed, General Manager, and Alex Madsen, Creative Services Director, for bringing this dream into reality. Thank you, KJTL Fox 18, for agreeing to air this powerful message during prime time. We are especially grateful to our sponsors, as without their support, this event would not have been possible. As a reminder, Hands to Hands Community Fund supports the following local nonprofits: If you would like to help us in our mission to support the programs and services of these agencies, please go to our website or feel free to contact our office.
Be a coffee bean.